For any of y'all that haven't joined us for an event, welcome. Um, if you can do me a favor and go ahead and mute yourself if you aren't already, and it is completely up to you if you want to keep your camera on or not. If you hear me talking to a person named Andrew, Andrew is our amazing marketing coordinator who will be helping me out with hosting the event. So welcome everyone. I'm Taylor Mizuno-Moore. I'm the founder, consultant, and therapist for Mizuno Consulting. Um, I just did the math today, and we're almost approaching a year of having this organization up and running. Um, but yeah, today's a really special day because I get to show off my favorite person in the entire world, and that is my my partner, my life partner of 10 plus years, um, Thomas. Thomas, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Thomas Mizuno-Moore. Um, I guess professional history, right? So I've been in the focus of this, uh, what are we calling them? Seminar?
Webinar event.
Webinar? Event's great. Event's a great catch-all
We're
word.
very professional. Yeah.
The focus of it is on like hospitality. And so to that end, my area of expertise is hospitality. I've been in some form of like customer facing hospitality for the last 23 years. Um, the majority of that has been in bar operations. So first as a bartender, then as a bar manager, then as a restaurant manager, and then as a restaurant manager in a really large group. And then for the last 7.5 years, I was part of a large national restaurant group, and then the last five of that has been spent in like multi-unit bar um sort of operations management. So like overseeing by the end of that role, I was overseeing, I think, 13 bar programs across 3 states. Um, I've been in most types of bar programs, sort of like kind of divey places, some nightlife spots, restaurants that were small, restaurants that were big. Kind of the only space I haven't been in is hotels, but almost everything else I've done.
So it's been a very boring 20-ish years for you, naturally. I, I just kind of want to jump in a bit because I do think that there are folks that have an idea of what hospitality is, have either worked in it or have this kind of like envision of what the assumptions are around it. So can you, in layman's terms, what is hospitality?
Yeah, I think you asked me this question to try to prep me for this, and I started trying to think about like how I would even describe what this is. And it's like a pretty diverse network of professions that all kind of serve the ultimate goal of um, taking care of people. And it's like typically would be like taking care of strangers, right? So like there's not that you couldn't apply hospitality principles to like your friends and family, but generally speaking, it's this idea that it's a business where your job is to take care of a person you don't necessarily know. And that could be a restaurant or a bar or a hotel. It could be the people that service those parts of the industry. So food vendors, farmers are a part of that network. People who make, in my particular area, right, it's people who make spirits, who make glassware, who make ice machines, it's a pretty wide array of jobs and professions and roles that all sort of like the end user of that network is the guest coming into the space and being taken care of. Does that answer that?
So not specific. It's very general, and
Yeah.
I think like hospitality is kind of in its name too, which is hospitable. Um, there's a focus on that relationship
Yeah.
dynamic too. One of the things that we were talking about in prep for today, we watched The Bear together. I think right now there's this huge social boom that's around this depiction of hospitality, this depiction of restaurant culture. Um, and for both of us having worked in hospitality, um, parts of that really ring true. Can you share a little bit about what parts of that culture really like hit you in the core? Like, ooh, that is exactly what it feels like, or
Sure.
maybe some things you didn't particularly agree with.
Yeah, I mean, I think the show generally does a pretty good job, certainly of capturing the vibe of being in a chaotic restaurant. Um, I mean, like obviously they took liberties, but anybody who's worked in a bar or restaurant has crazy stories. That's just sort of part of it. So is the bear obviously like a really concentrated, heightened version of that? Of course, it was made for TV.
Mhm,
Um, but I mean, there's a reason that there was such a positive response to the show from people working in hospitality because it really did feel kind of representative. Everybody's experienced something like what you see in that show. Um, with the caveat being that it is like a really specific sort of like it's a narrow subset of restaurants, like the type of place that or the type of training and the type of restaurant that Carmi came from is a very narrow version of a restaurant, like that
mhm,
super high-end Michelin star style thing. But some of the stuff about like, the to-go ticket printer going nuts and like some of that stuff, like people have experienced that, like something things go wrong literally every day.
mhm,
I think it captured that well. I will say, like, its representation of the River North neighborhood of Chicago took some liberties. That wasn't an entirely accurate representation of the River North, but you would only know that if you lived here.
mhm. Sure. Um, so kind of for the conversation moving forward, first and foremost, the chat is open always. So we are going to carve out some time towards the end to do some Q&A. Um, but as we go to, if we see something pop up, I'll definitely, try to recognize it and acknowledge it. And um, but sort of for the foundation moving forward, there is this, we're going to emphasize um, this intersectionality between mental health, mental awareness, wellness, excuse me, and hospitality. I don't think that they're, in my personal opinion, a better duo to represent both worlds than somebody that's been in hospitality for 20 something years and a mental health professional like myself that worked in hospitality and then inevitably chose not to do that anymore. Um, so launching into our conversation, we had a bit of prep around this construct of ambient anxiety. Those that know me really well, I am writing my dissertation on ambient anxiety in organizations. Um, so just so we're all speaking the same language, ultimately ambient anxiety is this elevated feeling that fear or danger is happening in your environment, but you can't really pinpoint where it's coming from. So I'm sure everybody has had the experience of like stepping into a room and you can almost feel the tension in the room. That is what ambient anxiety is. Um, Sometimes for folks that get pulled into that feeling, it can manifest in many different ways: heart racing, sweaty palms, mind is going a mile a minute. Um, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in hospitality. So just based off of, the definition and what some of the research has suggested, can you share a little bit about how you've related to that?
Yeah, I mean, sure. It's like a really like being what we would like the term we would use like being in service, right? Like when the restaurant or bar is open to guests. Um, it's a pressure cooker environment. There's a lot of personalities trying to coexist, hopefully all sort of like attempting to achieve the same goal, but like let's say for example that like that type of goal setting isn't clear, that can create a lot of chaos between even members of the same team, who all think that they have their own individual grasp on what needs to be done. And so in the course of like a dinner service, um, like it's very easy and common for tempers to flare because there's not like cohesiveness around sort of that goal setting. Um, and you're in an environment where you're wearing multiple hats typically, right? You're especially as a like from my own personal background, like bartending, where you're doing all of the normal guest service functions, but you also have this piece where you're producing drinks. So there's like the craft portion as the like service component or the hospitality component. And so you're just trying to balance a lot of things. You're trying to keep a lot of balls in the air as you're going through it. And it's really easy to if you're not careful, it's really easy to respond, I would say, like more harshly to a teammate than you maybe intend to in the moment. And hopefully, at the end of service, you can come back around and apologize, or you can like try to resolve that with your teammates. But that's easier said than done sometimes in practice, right? And in addition to all of the inter team or intra team dynamics, there's also this responsibility to some extent to also manage the emotional state of the guest that they're coming in to be taken care of, and you don't know what they're bringing in with them if they've had a bad day in another way, and you can't rely on the guest to necessarily manage themselves in that way, and then you're trying to manage that too. So there's just a lot of it's a pressure cooker of personalities and different expectations, and not being equipped to deal with that can snowball pretty quickly.
And I think you use the word chaotic when you were describing just kind of generally what happens during service, um, in the restaurant or in the bar, because I do think that there's a lot of this like autopilot that you get, and I've seen it for you, this autopilot that you get into, and you're clocking a million things at the same time. The word I personally would associate with that would be like overwhelm, and I wouldn't know what to do with. I literally left the industry because it was just too much, and instead became a therapist. So when we're thinking about how do you manage, you're managing everybody else, but how do you manage what's going on for you as an individual?
Um, some of that, some of that, I think it's become more intentional as I've gotten more experience. I've been able to sort of almost deconstruct and then reconstruct the way I approached it. I think part of why started and then stayed in hospitality is that it felt natural. There was sort of an unconscious component to the ability to kind of like uh compartmentalize each task that just sort of came naturally to me. Thank goodness. It would have been a lot harder, I think, if that had not been what I described as like my superpower, that I'm really good at.
It's a superpower. He's the king of compartmentalization. Like I've learned a few things from you in terms of how you hold those boundaries, but I'm cutting off. Keep going.
Yeah, that I don't, it's a tough lesson to learn if it doesn't come naturally. Like I've seen people who are exceptionally talented hospitality professionals, but maybe have a hard time with that compartmentalization piece. And especially when you're interacting with like a guest. I mean, you're the teammate too, but in particular, this happens a lot in the guest employee dynamic, that people are kind of rude and oblivious with regularity.
Mhm.
And it's a hard lesson to learn that that's not really about you. And holding that boundary where like somebody's being rude and it's not like I was fortunate that that came naturally to me. That I could see someone else being rude and dismissive of me, and I was like, "Oh, that's not about me at all. That's something that's happening with you."
And where did you learn that?
No idea. I have no idea. That was just a thing that that existed, and it wasn't until I think much later, right? Like within the last probably 7 years, 5 to 7 years, that I understood that consciously. That I understood that that's what that was. That's what I was doing, right? I think it was just a thing that was I was doing unconsciously for most of the career,
Mhm,
and it was then once I understood what that skill was, that I was able to then sort of do it on purpose.
mhm,
Um, because I think for me in particular, right, I'm not like in hospitality, right, you would call it like being in the weeds, like when you're like when you are out of control of your own productivity or whatever in that context. Um, I'm not by any means like trying to allege that I've never been in the weeds. Of course, I've been in the weeds.
mhm.
Uh, it happens less and less the longer I went, and it's like not happened at all probably in the last 5 years once I understood this consciously, because then it becomes a choice that you're executing, that like if you know all the sort of warning signs of the weeds coming, it's easier to consciously avoid it. It's only when you're not aware that you can then sort of like be surprised by
Mhm.
something happening in the dynamic in the restaurant, um, where you've lost sort of containment of what you're supposed to be doing.
And you're really approaching this from, I would say, the privilege of being in a leadership position that enables you to foresee what's happening in that organization and be able to intervene before things start to bubble over.
Sure.
For those that, are gosh, I think of servers, and you have your section, and then you've got all those tables, and you're trying to keep these orders in mind, and there's so much turnover when you're in the weeds and you're juggling all of those plates. When you're not in a position of power, yeah, that was funny.
Mhm.
Andrew, that was funny. Mark that. Um, when if you're not in a position of power where you can speak to it and then do something about it,
Yeah.
what would you recommend?
I mean, that's complicated. That's part of why I think hospitality as an industry sees such high levels of turnover and job changing, is that if you are somebody who's not in a position to affect change yourself, and you feel like the people you report into, your managers or your owners or whomever, isn't like receptive to feedback or those types of things, if those protections aren't in place, uh of course you don't want to stay in that type of a job,
Mhm,
right? There is so much pressure and chaos around trying to um do that job, especially at high level, like from a player quality standpoint, that if your bosses aren't a support structure for you, I mean, this is maybe a hot take, but like you shouldn't stay there. You
mhm,
shouldn't work there if your boss doesn't provide that support for you. Or if not your boss, somebody in the organization who is able to affect change to improve a situation, right? Um, I would say on an individual level, there's a lot you can do sort of in the moment as far as managing a hard situation, but it's nearly impossible to do that without the support of the team that's around you. Nobody's working in a restaurant, with some exceptions, alone,
mhm,
right? And so, sort of part of when we talked about, like when I've trained bartenders, one of the things I tell them is like the job is designed to be done on a team. If you're trying to do it alone, not only are you making it harder for yourself, you're also just doing it wrong. Like you're supposed to be leveraging the team around you. Um, because different people have different strengths, and also the job is just impossible to do by yourself.
mhm. So there's this strong emphasis on this team dynamic, yet I'm somebody that if I'm joining a team, I'm super apprehensive until there's some sort of safety that's been proven, or some psychological safety or some sort of trust that's been established. I think for most people, they would say that that's something that can get built up over time. How would you say trust is built within a team? Mm, or I guess what are some concrete examples of how you've witnessed that a healthy team dynamic?
Sure. I mean, there's no like magic bullet here. Like it's like a it is kind of what you said that you have to it's the like what trust but verify or whatever. It's like I can tell you all these things about what the goals are, but if you don't see those things in practice, then my word is shot,
Mhm,
right? So if I it's about being well, I guess speaking from a leadership standpoint, right? It's about me as a leader being open to feedback who from people who report to me. And that if they're telling me that their experience is this thing, I should take them at their word,
mhm,
right? Or not, and try to address the thing that is impacting their ability to be effective, and leave my ego out of that equation.
mhm,
Like, uh, again, like, I'm explicit in my sort of educational paradigm, right? I'm explicit that like this, my expectation for people who work for me, or report in, I don't love that language, but people who work, people who report to me, right? That the expectation is that you should come to work every day prepared to receive feedback and improve something from the day before. And I apply that same um, rigor to my own work.
mhm,
That if I find that something I've been doing is maybe not the best way, I don't get caught up in the fact that I had been doing it wrong before. I just try to do it better the next time.
mhm,
And I think as long as everyone has that, again, it's about like that clear goal setting mentality. If you say the goal of this team is to continually improve, it's not to be perfect, it's to do it better every time.
mhm.
Uh, no matter what level of the hierarchy you're in.
Totally. Yeah, so when we're talking about things on an organizational level, at least group dynamics, in psychology, there is a collectiveness around we tend to do better when we know explicitly what the goal is, how each of us play a role in achieving that goal. Things are communicated in a way that's efficient and clear. And this may mean that, like, you and I could both be speaking English, but if we don't have the same dictionary, it's not going to make sense. So, how to create language within a team too to set that organization up for success. And really, what it sounds like is this modeling from leadership on how to remove the individualization from it and set the organization first.
Yeah. But like, and that has to be like, that's a cultural choice that a leadership team has to make, right? Again, like there's, again, explicitly, not to keep referring to the training I've done, but like explicitly when I talk about the way in which I will give feedback, right? Is it's only ever going to be about the work and doing the work better. It's never going to be about the person,
Mhm,
right? It's not, you did this thing wrong because you're a bad person. That's an insane way to give feedback. It's
yeah,
about, this is the thing that you didn't do correctly. Here's the way to do it better. This is the, if, I mean, some people, that's all they need. Some people also want to understand the why of it, which I'm always happy to provide. Why is that a better way to do it? Great, let's get into it.
mhm,
Like whatever that person needs to understand the way to improve. And I think that sort of that leading by example component, which is I'm not holding you to that standard and not me. I'm also trying to be as self-reflective as possible about the quality of my own work and where there are opportunities to improve it. And if you can demonstrate that for yourself, and if I leave my own ego out of the improvement of my own work, then it makes it very easy for other people to do the same because there's not
mhm,
that tension is removed from the equation.
mhm. Dare I say the ambient anxiety that comes with
Sure.
see how we circle back there? Okay. Um, one of bigger the bigger things that I wanted to focus on was concrete skills. And for those that are in hospitality that are here, I literally have Don't Cry in the Walk-In as an example of how to manage um, anxiety. But in terms of concrete skills that folks can apply in the work setting, how to stay mindful, how to um, be self-reflective, that is a skill like everything else. How to distance yourself from the chaos and all, how to not to get pulled in. What are some like, how does that look in hospitality?
I think that's a complex question, right? Obviously.
Mhm,
Um, I think different skills are going to be useful at different in different moments of that workflow, right? It's not going to be useful if you're in the middle of dinner service and you're responsible for serving 20 people. That's not the time to sort of like take a step back and analyze your sort of method for hospitality or whatever. That's like, that would be an end of shift type of exercise or a day off exercise, right? So in the moment, like when chaos is at its peak and your anxiety is like critical, um, I think again, like my advice would be leverage the team around you.
mhm.
If you need to take a second to like catch your breath and like reorganize yourself, ask someone, ask your neighbor, the person covering the tables next to you, hey, can you give me 5 minutes? Just cover, like, watch my tables for me. I need to like reorient myself. Um, that can be really powerful. Even something as simple as, like I said this to bartenders, if you take 30 seconds to clean and reset your bar station, even if things are chaotic around you, taking that small window of time, um, to get yourself clean and organized and reset and like thinking through what the next 40 things you need to do are, rather than just sort of like trying to move faster to get them done. You're not going to be like that. The efficiency is more important than the speed, if that makes sense, right? Like knowing what you're doing is more important than doing it fast. I've never once in my career, like, it's never been a make or break situation that 30 seconds wouldn't have changed if I had taken 30 seconds to get organized, right? Especially if you're good about that communication with the guest. Uh, you're in the middle of something. I use this example of like with washing your hands, right? The hands are like your primary tool as a bartender. They need to be clean all the time, just from like a safety standpoint, but that is a point of hospitality to make sure that you're safely serving people. In 18 years bartending, I've never once had a guest be upset with me if I said, give me a few moments to wash my hands and then I'll make your drink. Like nobody's going to be upset about that. So just giving yourself that moment to sort of like clear the pipeline and prepare for the next thing is so much more powerful than trying to speed up. You're actually making it harder to recover than even just like taking a moment to reset. And if you need more than a moment, then yeah, leverage the team around you. I need somebody to help cover me. I need to, like, you're a human being. If you need to go to the restroom, splash water on your face, like whatever, just have your team help you. Um, I mean, and I think then for me, the sort of larger scale, how do I make continual day-to-day improvements? That's about getting to the end of that shift and thinking about, okay, here are all the places where tonight was harder than it needed to be. And what is the thing I can do tomorrow so that those things don't happen again?
Mhm.
It's that sort of like that constant improvement cycle. And if that becomes part of your routine, that you're constantly trying to make every day easier, they will get easier.
Yet I'm having a reaction to this culture around what isn't working and how to make it better. And I have this want to also include as part of the conversation, these are the things that worked really well. This was the thing, this was like the highlight of the shift. This was the thing that I could point to that said, yes, more of that. Because I do think us as humans, we respond really, really well to positive reinforcement. We love it when people say our name. We love it when our egos are stroked. We love when we are told that that is something that we did through the eyes of somebody in a position of privilege. looked good or we did our jobs well.
Sure. Yeah, you're pointing out a Thomas personality issue, which is that I'm going to be constantly critiquing my own performance. Yeah, I would say for sure if I'm providing feedback, I'm almost always trying to talk about something positive.
Mhm.
Um, I'm perhaps not as good as saying those things to myself.
Uh-huh. Um, and so what you're opening, we're opening the conversation now up to what folks can be mindful of when they're internalizing their own narratives about their performance. And I do think performance is an appropriate word to use when we're thinking about hospitality, because there's sort of like this in front of the curtain behavior and then back of the curtain behavior, where if you're front of house, you have to look polished and presentable, and you almost like this collective um stoic maybe is a good word, versus back of house is absolute shit show chaos. Like chefs are yelling. It's I mean, well, in the like the nice ones, like chefs are yelling, maybe not explicits, but like heard and all of those things. It's a very efficient communication. But I am having this reaction to like this front of house versus back of house and how much of a performance it really does parallel.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, some of that's just for everyone in front of house, but I think in particular, bartenders, because I mean, in addition to sort of like the production of like drinks, right? The like the craft of I'm making a thing you're going to consume part of it. That's obviously a pretty significant difference from that role and any other role. But also one of the other really fundamental differences between a bartender and a server, say, or a bartender in almost any other role. Maybe the host stand actually comes the closest to this, which is at the host stand and the bar, the guest is the one controlling when the interaction begins and ends. And in every other part of the restaurant, typically the employee is driving that. Like a server comes to the table, um, and the server leaves the table, and they're in more control of when the interaction happens. Uh, Bartenders aren't, right? The guest comes up to the bar. The bar is where you are the entire shift, presumably. And so to an extent, it feels very much like you're on stage, right? That the place that you're doing the work is the place that the guest is sitting with you. And that can be a really useful construct. Like if you think about yourself as being on stage, it does give you a little bit of emotional distance
Yeah.
from what's happening. And even like the physicality of the bar, there's a barrier between you and the guest. So you have like it does feel protective
Mhm.
to have like a space. Um, but it also means that, you know, you can curate the image that you're putting out in that environment. And like, for me in particular, personally, right, my normal state of being is fairly quiet and introverted. And people who know me only from work, that's typically a surprise to them
Mhm.
because the behind the bar version of me is a choice that I've made.
Mhm.
Um, and that can be useful, certainly in like managing the chaos of that
Mhm.
environment.
Mhm. And yes, so I think that oh, that's a good question.
Um,
I didn't want to just jump in. So
yeah,
I thought I'd
no.
put it in the chat, but yeah, because I've faced that, like I've worked in catering before, and I've faced a similar situation where you have to be the one to or the guests have to approach you. So you're kind of just waiting for this moment to happen. It could be it could trigger a lot of anxiousness for someone that has that. So I just wanted to see your thoughts on that.
Sure.
From, I mean, I'll jump in just because from like a psychological perspective, right? Social anxiety is something that maybe not necessarily has a cure, but you can manage it in very, very efficient ways. I'm thinking of just like exposures, exposure therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. Those are ways that you can approach anxiety in a really productive way, in a really efficient way. And really it's about making that anxiety intentional. So I think our natural tendency when we're struggling with social anxiety is we want to go away from it or we want to avoid, when really avoidance isn't going to be the most helpful way to engage with that. So let's say I was your therapist in this situation, I would say, great, let's do as many things to make you uncomfortable in front of the guest as possible without, it being harmful to your professional life. But it might be like stumble over your words in front of a guest. It might be, like I would just find things that for you as an individual that were really uncomfortable, um, and probably have an open conversation with some form of leader that you can work with and say, hey, this is something that I want to um, work on. So I'm actually really welcoming more experiences that are like that. Um, yeah, you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the kind of like nuanced kind of cop out answer is it's going to be really highly dependent on um how acutely the social anxiety impacts your ability to interact with somebody, right? Like this is for this might not be the right job for someone where that is going to be a real barrier because it could be, right? It could be a real barrier. Um, I guess I can say again, speaking only from my own experience here, my I die in small talk situations. Like if you
Mhm.
put me in a room of strangers where I don't have a function to perform, I become very quiet and I'm much more observational in nature. There was something about the shift in I was there to perform a function that I understood that made it really easy to interact. It was my sort of like cognitive loophole to
Mhm.
deal with the fact that I wouldn't naturally want to talk to people. But if I was talking to them about providing a hospital meal experience, that was a sort of way for me to bypass that part of my natural inclination.
Mhm.
But some of that, to an extent, I've actually thought about this, that um, I sort of weirdly chose a profession that forced me to deal with a part of me that I wouldn't have probably cultivated on my own, right? I would have, had I not been in this job, I probably wouldn't have been a super outgoing, comfortable with strangers person. And to the extent that I am, it's largely because of my experience doing this.
And dare I say, the exposure.
Yeah,
Mm.
totally.
Um, I'm just keeping an eye on time because I kind of want to shift more to this. Um, we talked a lot about what it looks like when you're at your job, what it looks like when you're in the workplace. Um, and you and I were having a conversation earlier today because a lot of management of that anxiety happened after you got home.
Sure.
Um, and so for some of you, you'll get a little bit of insight into kind of like what it looks like after Thomas returns home and I, am done with my day where really there's just a lot of communication between the two of us on kind of checking on each other in terms of what kind of day we're having. Um, I've had some texts from you that just kind of like pop up on my phone throughout the day. That's like, hey, just a heads up. I don't have like spoons today. If for those of you that are not familiar with spoon theory, please, please, please look it up. It is a beautiful and wonderful shorthand to communicate kind of like where your battery percentage is for the day. Um, but yeah, we've had those conversations throughout the day, and that looks kind of different after you get home too.
Yeah. I mean, I think like speaking generally about it, right? The sort of key component of this is to be really clear in communicating what your needs are. Like, I've never been this person, but my assumption would be if I were an extroverted person who was really energized by being around other people, that I would come home from work like needing to blow off steam because I would have been like packed with energy from the extroverted sort of interaction with the public. Um, and just be clear about that with your family or your friends or your partner or whoever that is, right? For me, it's been primarily I need time to sort of like come down from it. I need quiet. I need like taking a shower after work has been really helpful. I think because it's like such a clear like sensory sort of experience that's like, okay, I'm moving from work Thomas to home Thomas. And sometimes those two versions of me aren't necessarily compatible.
Mhm. What's actually kind of interesting is seeing you, and we've had this like we've had this conversation explicitly that um the way that you transition from work Thomas to home Thomas is, I can almost see it like get not necessarily like washed off of you, but I can almost see you like shed this layer. Um, I would say like 9 times out of 10 you come home and it smells like a restaurant. You smell like a restaurant. I love you so much, but you smell like a goddamn
Like
restaurant.
food, yeah.
And so if I'm not, you know, encouraging you to like take your space or take your time to take care of yourself, um, I can see you sort of like get caught up in this hospitality zone,
Mhm.
where for anyone that has loved ones that work in hospitality, they all talk fast. Everybody talks fast. Everybody is like very efficient and super clear about like what they're saying, because and it happens very, very, very fast. And there are some times where I have to turn to you and I have to say, slow down.
Yeah.
What is it like to be in an environment that isn't work and mentally, psychologically feel still really caught up in it?
Yeah, I mean, again, for most of my career, I was unaware of that, right? It was like I wasn't aware. I think I knew pretty early that the version of me that I was at work was constructed, like I had chosen to be that person at work. I didn't understand the transition, right? I didn't understand how I was getting from the really elevated, fast, um, I hesitate to use the word like fake extroverted. It was like intentional extroversion, right? Uh, and then like understanding moving from that version of me, which can be admittedly like hard to live with, especially the longer that I was in a leadership role. Like I was used, like my job for many years was understand what's going on, make a decision, fix the issue. Like everyone's going that way. And that is not a super great thing to bring home to your partner. It's maybe like not the most healthy version. And understanding that that's what I was doing took time.
Mm,
And I think like we talked about this when you posed the question to me in prep, which is like my immediate response was know ahead of time that you're gonna mess this up.
mhm,
Like you're gonna make a mistake, you're gonna hurt your partner's feelings, you're going to do it wrong sometimes. And being okay with that being true. And as long as the commitment is to work on it, the commitment is to like, again, like this goes back to that idea of like improvement that applies to the home version of how to deal with this too. It's like you're going to be coming home from a very intense experience on a daily basis and how to sort of not punish your like non-work partners,
mhm,
whether that be friends or spouses or whomever, right? Family. Um, how to recognize that the version of you that is managing the chaos of the restaurant doesn't need to be in at home. Like there can be I've lost the thread here, but like it's like the acknowledgement that those are two different, like the needs of the spaces are different, right? So like the version of you that needs to be quick decisions, sort of I talked about like the idea of like triage, right? Like recognizing that there's going to be 40 things going wrong. How many of them need to be addressed now? How many of them can be addressed at the end of the day? How many of them can I do next week? That is really good for crisis management, which is a lot of what being in a restaurant feels like sometimes. It's not great for like building a partnership at home. Because it doesn't leave space for the other person to provide feedback to you. You're just sort of charging forward, trying to take care of things because you're used to that being the expectation in the work setting. And being more intentional about like interrupting that sort of flow state once you've left the restaurant and been home, I think is important. It certainly has been important for us, for me to be able to interrupt that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a for those of I don't know who's seen it. There's this meme that's circulating, and it's somebody saying, "Oh, I had something bad happen to me," and then the person responded, "Do you want solution-oriented boyfriend or do you want emotion-focused boyfriend?" And it's this idea that something that you do very, very, very well is you want to fix things. You want to make me feel good. You want to um, take care of me in a very hospitable way, which is delightful. And also, there are times where there is no fix, and there's times where there's no amount of like ginger ale or ice water or filling up um, my thermos or whatever with tea is going to take the sting out of whatever it is I'm going through.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the growth edge that I've seen for a lot of people in hospitality is how do you lean into being able to tolerate that there's no amount of providing a service that is going to take the sting out
Yeah.
that discomfort.
Yeah, it's like it's a almost like forbidden idea in the work context, and it has to be okay at home. There's going to be like, or in almost every other dynamic, there's not a solution. I mean, it happens in the work dynamic, but very rarely is there not a way to resolve something. And that's just not always going to be the case in other places. Uh, sometimes that question explicitly has been useful. Like, do you need me to try to fix this? And I would say 99 times out of 100, you're like, no, I just need to vent. I just need you to listen to the thing that pissed me off today. And I go, great, got it. I flip that switch and I'm like, I'm not trying to solve this problem now. I'm just the person that you trust to tell.
So for hospitality folks, would you say if you're having open communication with your partner, and your partner is dealing with something, that being able to articulate, you don't need to do anything right now, but just listen is an effective way to communicate needs.
Sure. I think so, right? I mean, again, I think there's probably an assumed level of trust that we're talking about here, that like you trust your partner to receive that in the right way. But yeah, certainly I'm in favor of direct communication, generally speaking. That is the way I best understand what's going on. If you say, I don't need you to do anything, I just need you to listen to me, I can go, great, I understand what you need right now. Sometimes, like, again, the natural inclination for me is to want to try to resolve the issue or come up with a solution to the issue. And that might happen naturally, like through the course of just listening.
Yeah.
Or once the sort of emotional charge of the conversation has been sort of like, once that balloon's been deflated and your tension is gone because you've been able to vent it, then we can have a much more productive conversation about how to then like either resolve it if it's an ongoing issue or prevent the issue from happening again. Like that's a much easier conversation to have once you've deflated that balloon.
And a very real situation that has happened for both of us, this happens quite frequently, is if I need a vent or something, I will turn to you and I'll say, this isn't about you. This is about me. It's not about you. But, and then I'll like go off on this tangent and I'll be like really elevated and dynamic, which I think if you're not able to kind of like articulate to your partner that I'm recognizing this isn't about you, this is not about anything that is going on in our home, this is just what I'm holding, I need to like put it out there in the universe. There's a bit of this, we are now teammates
Sure.
in tackling this shared, well, it wasn't shared before, but now it is, this shared thing. So I think partnership is really a special thing that you can rely on, just like you were saying, how you rely on your team at work. You can rely on your partner if you have the privilege of having one.
And be direct about it. Or whatever that is, like if you're unpartnered and you live alone, I mean, if you are unpartnered but have a roommate, hopefully to the extent that you can, try to like be direct about those things with your roommate. If you live alone but you have friends, I guess it depends on what you need, right? Like if you're somebody like me who, when I lived alone before you and I started dating, um, and then ultimately lived together, right? I would get off work and I would go home and I'd be alone. I would like turn on Netflix and I took that space because that's what I needed. But if I had been the type of person that needed to be out with friends, like trying to be direct about that, trying to, you know, like, I don't know, saying what you need is not the end of the world. It'll be okay to say what you need.
And for some, it comes easier than others. An extreme of that is narcissism, and we don't like that word and we don't like those characteristics. But I do think like a healthy level of self, and advocacy for the self is necessary. And again, keeping an eye on time, you and I could probably have an entire conversation around how to take care of yourself.
Sure.
What it's looked like for you working in hospitality. There have been I'm 6 years of not being around for like the day after Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve because you're bartending, New Year's Eve. I don't think we've had a New Year's Eve together because there's just so much going on. So yeah, I don't think today is the day to have that conversation, but so much of our focus today has been about dynamics, in the workplace and dynamics after you come home. But I think maybe something we can take some time out in the future to talk about is how to take care of yourself as an individual.
Sure. And it'll look different for everyone. So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna actually close my iPad because I'm having some ADHD focus issues here. We've got 6+ minutes. We'll stay on as long as anyone wants to stay on, but any questions, comments, concerns, things that are niche for just you, or you want some on the spot Mizuno Consulting, we're here for it. That could have been a lot cheesier, but I'm quite proud of myself that wasn't cheesy. Yes, follow us on Instagram. Andrew's done a really great job at managing that for me.
Hey guys. Hello.
Hey.
I just wanted to say how I appreciated, the multi-segments that you guys did talk about, from, the earlier parts of how to deal with like where your environment is currently at and how to reevaluate, if your superior is like taking critical feedback, positive or negative, or if they're even responding to it, or if they're just shoving it under the rug. I really appreciate that. How you talk about separating, your work persona and your home life persona, and it's like you don't need to fix everything. And I'm not trying to, it's not just about, You said the one meme, but it made me think about how the new, well, revamped show, How I Met Your Father. And like, there's one character goes like, "Do you want the fluff or the tough?"
Mhm.
And it's like, just listen to me and just be supportive, and that's it. And then again, like even the way you guys ended of like, well, there's like future segments to even listen about. So I don't know if this is episode one or whatnot, because I'm just trying to like, because again, I was like, oh my goodness. But this was a positive sit-in, and I really appreciate that. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful, and I hope it's segment one of many. It's not like we don't have our specialties. But I do think that like from our collective experiences, there's a pretty unique intersectionality that is not being talked about in hospitality. I mean, even before this event, we were talking a little bit about how we could have an entire segment on substance use in hospitality, coping, maladaptive coping mechanisms in hospitality in the way that we've observed. It's never been our thing because my coping was avoidance. I just left it all together. But yeah, just always sort of like interested in more conversations around it. And we have been thinking about doing a group in the fall for hospitality folks to come together and uh, figure out ways that they can lean on each other in terms of how they're coping and how to get through the day. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that coping thing is like, I mean, it's changing, but like the culture is, the larger culture of hospitality has been so sort of like grind mentality driven that that self-care component is often overlooked. For myself, especially, it's been a longer journey for me to understand how to pour back into myself to take care of myself, because so much of the way that you're sort of proving value is how much you're able to produce without needing anything, which is only sustainable to a point, right? And I think like having honest conversations about that is going to be important for longevity in that industry, because it is very, or can be very extractive
Mhm.
from a person working in it.
Yeah, the burnout levels are just so high. I mean, burnout in general, I think, is I guess like the buzzword, especially since the pandemic and the lockdown happened. There was all of this recognition of folks that were experiencing burnout at that level, and it's kind of like, hey, this is not anything new. This is now just getting clocked because of the way our world has shifted, and it doesn't need to be swept up under the rug. It's not going anywhere. So there needs to be some sort of structural change in order to prevent that from happening. Because you could like take days off all you want, you're still going to return to the same environment that's going to create that burnout. So really, it's about how the organization is getting set up. Um, we want to we want to set people up for success, and the best way to do that is modifications of an organization, which is our specialty. We love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like self-care, like what does that actually mean? How do you take care of yourself? Because I don't think it's about I think it might mean like maybe a day of kind of like vegging out and watching really awful shows on Netflix and, you know, ordering a pizza and like having a day to truly do nothing. And actually, the research does support that having one day a week like that is going to help with productivity and efficiency. But ultimately, how do you give back to yourself?
Yeah. And also like which self-care activity you choose, can be different based on how much like residual energy you have, right? One of the things I did is like I wrote down all the things that I felt like would be restorative to me, right? Activities that could potentially be restorative to me, but I structured them. It's like, okay, if I have like a ton of time and energy, maybe I would do this thing. But if I'm like totally exhausted at the end of a week, maybe the thing that's restorative is just like watch a movie that I love. You know what I mean? It's just like depending on what your energy level is, um, you might get more return from the thing that requires more investment, but you can only do that if you have the energy to begin with. So like like recognizing where you're at already and like choosing a self-care activity based on where you're at, not where you'd like to be.
Right. You don't need that added pressure. No one needs that.